not just clear, or anything that you think should be included in the session, even in the law. So the idea of having the session today is to have meaningful conversations with each other. Because if we don't have those discourses, if we don't have those conversations, we're never going to be able to see the change or be the change that we want to be or we want to see. It's for all of us to take on the responsibility to think, to talk about it, to make sure that we are safe, the people around us are safe, and the laws, the policies that govern us, they actually protect us. So how they are being implemented or not implemented, or what all could be done to improve or to make sure that a wrongdoing is not repeated. To ensure all of that, it is always better to keep having these conversations. So I have always believed that we actually bring about change when the change happens from the grassroots level. So when we talk about the change, we're not saying that okay, overnight we'll be able to see a better world or a better country or a better society. But we start noticing change when the things around us change, when the people around us change for the better, when we change for the better. So grassroots level discussions are extremely important, in my opinion, and that's what I really want to do with you today in our limited time that we have together, and I wish we're able to continue this. Now, you can also see the tab that says reactions. So you can give me your reactions. You can also, talk about just exactly how you're feeling or what you're thinking just by giving me those emojis, and I'll be able to look at them. If you're not, um if you're not able to just write anything at that point, or if you're not, like Ravinder ji just gave me a thumbs up. And Seema has been raising her hand. I don't think Seema knows that. Seema, you can just take your hand down. I don't think you know that it's being raised. So okay, now that we have enough of us, before I go on to talking about how many of us are law students or how many of us are just studying or working, before that, I would just like to briefly introduce myself. So, Seema, I've muted you. Just make sure that you're not unmuting yourself without having anything to say, because that will be disturbing for the entire session and also embarrassing for you. So, please take care of that. So, hi everybody. I'm Sania Arora. I'm an advocate practicing on the civil side for the last 3 years. I graduated from Punjab University, Chandigarh in 2018. Before that, I've done my political science honors from Lady Shriram College. Now, I founded Law Chakra, and honestly, it's just a baby right now. It's a newborn baby. It's a dream project that I'm still continually building. The idea, the aim is to eventually have a teaching law firm where we're not just practicing law, we're also teaching how to practice law. Like there are those teaching hospitals, facilities where this is so experiential that just theoretical learning or theoretical information will not cut it for you. And a lot of the times I have faced it myself, being a first generation lawyer and coming from a non NLU. It gets extremely difficult to get the right opportunities or even the right guidance. And honestly, I've not really found any proper guidance out there. And so I thought that if there's something that I felt the need for and I couldn't find it, and I'm just going left, right, center trying to make it on my own, then why not share my struggles, my experiences, my mistakes with others who are upcoming, who are really new, and who don't really know how it happens or how it works. So why not just share my information, my experiences with them, so at least they're not making the same mistakes, or they can find the mentor that I couldn't find. So that is the idea behind Law Chakra. I'll elaborate on that when we start the presentation. But before we do that, thank you so much for being here. Can you just tell me, so I'll ask you a question. Are you a law student? If you are a law student, can you just raise your hand? So you'll be able to find the option to raise your hand in the reactions. Okay. Okay, great. So 4 of us are law students. That's great. Can you also write in the chat box what year law are you doing right now? Are you in the first year, second year? I'm assuming you're in 5 years law. So you can just tell me in the chat box. Also, everybody else, before we officially begin, I would also like to know how you're feeling today and where you're joining us from. It's very important to get a sense of the room before we start having these conversations and to make sure that there's effective exchange of ideas and knowledge. So I would love to hear from you. Can you write in the chat box where you're joining us from and how are you feeling today? So Amrita is in the third year. Hi Amrita. So you have your name as USA UNCHR. Is there any particular reason for that? I was very, very happy. I was like, wow, UN is here. Okay, Monica pursuing LLB first year. That's amazing. First year, you have the grit to learn to go above and beyond your course. That's amazing. Hi Shrey. Good morning. You're from Kanpur. Okay, great. Sapna is from Mumbai. Good, great. Thank you. Thank you, Sonali. Sonali is in second year, BBA LLB in Chhattisgarh. Wow, that's great. So a lot of us are law students. Hi, Lakshmi. It's good to see you again. Thank you for joining us. Um, so is there anybody who's working in the legal field? Monica? Okay, Shrey, you're working. Great. Are you a lawyer? Are you a practicing lawyer? You can just write in the chat box. Hi, Madhulika, first year student from Delhi. That's great. I am loving the energy, that there are such young people who are spending their Sunday like this, trying to learn, trying to upskill, trying to grow. That's amazing, amazing to see. Hi, Monica. Monica is also pursuing LLB first year from Telangana. Great. Shrey, you're enrolled in Delhi Bar Council. High five. How are you liking it? I can't hear you when you unmute yourself because of the noise in the background. So you can just write in the chat box. And we'll also continue having this conversation towards the end. Now, without any further ado, I would start the topic that we have gathered here to discuss. I have prepared a PPT for you, a presentation that will hopefully structure our session, and it will take us from one step to another in a smooth manner, so we can figure out, okay, what is the context exactly, what are the steps involved, what can be done after, before, during, things like that. I will talk to you about all the things that we're supposed to discuss today through that presentation. Once I've started presenting, I may not be able to see your chat in the chat box, but you can keep putting in your questions. If you can't hear me or if there's any lag, then please let me know. You have my number in the group, from the group, so you can always just text me and say, ma'am, your video is frozen or your voice is not audible or anything like that. Okay, so please let me know. I don't want to make a fool out of myself. And also, I don't want this to be a monologue. So I will quickly finish all that I have to say. In between, if there are any questions that can't wait, you can also unmute yourself and you can ask me that question then and there. But only if you think it's an emergency and it can't really wait. Okay. So if I have your permission, can I start the presentation? You can just write yes in the chat box if I can start. Hi, Lakshi. Lakshi is from Chandigarh, enrolled in Punjab, Haryana. Great, Lakshi. I'm so glad to see you here again. So, everybody. Hi, Seema. Okay, great. So, Shrey, Lakshi, everybody has said we can start. Awesome. We are going to start. I can pose a question to you in between. So, you can just unmute yourself and answer me if I'm not able to see the chat at that point. Okay. So, let's start with the presentation. So I hope you're able to see my screen. Can you just write yes in the chat box if you're able to see my screen? Okay, yes, great. I can see the chat box. Yes. All right. Thank you so much. So I'll keep asking for your assistance. So let's begin. We're going to talk about law and domestic violence today. The aim is to armor you with knowledge, which means that if you know the rights and if you know the law, you can actually empower yourself and those around you. So in order to do that, you need to have the knowledge. You need to be thinking about it. You need to know what it's all about. And we're going to do that today. So what are our points for discussion for today? Our agenda is, first, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about who are we, who's Law Chakra, who's Sania Arora. I've already given you a brief introduction, but I'll be elaborating on that a little bit. Then I'm going to take you through the basics of protection of women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. So very basics. Okay, we will just be scratching the surface. Do not take this to be an exhaustive course or an exhaustive teaching on this particular topic, because there's so much that can be said, that can be talked about, that can be taught and learned, which cannot necessarily be done within an hour. So please understand that these are just the thought starters or the prompts for you. I'm just going to tell you the basics, and to study deeper, to delve deeper, to understand better, to ask more questions and to study more about it is on you. Then we'll talk about the phases of dealing with it, the procedure. What happens legally? What happens procedurally? What happens before the proceedings, during the proceedings, and after the proceedings? And finally, we are going to also address the elephant in the room, which is the misuse of the law. A lot of people have argued and debated for the longest time that this law, in addition to Section 498A of IPC and Dowry Prohibition Act and other legislations that are specifically enacted for protection of women, are being misused by women as legal terrorism and things like that. So we're going to talk about that also, and some suggestions on my end for the way forward, how we can improve. And here I will also be requiring your help, what you think we can do to improve, to be better, to implement it better, to make sure that everybody really gets the benefit that has been envisioned, that has been idealized, that has been the object and the purpose of this enactment. So as I told you, Law Chakra is a dream project. What I'm trying to do is that I want to work towards building a world where the practice of law is about merit and not about accreditation. So which college you're coming from, how many courses you've done, how many degrees do you hold, or association where nepotism comes in, how many people you know, how many contacts you have, how much how much of a pull you have with the people that you're dealing with or working with, or age. So we all know that the older you are in this profession, somehow the more experienced you are deemed to be and the more seriously you're taken. I forgot to mention gender here. So it shouldn't be about gender either. And the reason I forgot to mention gender here is because I don't think that that should even be something that we need to say. It should be obvious. Men, women, any person not really abiding by the binary gender classification and going with the non-binary or the LGBTQIA plus community, any person, just by virtue of being a person, a human, should have the right to do what they want to do, to practice law if they have qualified for it, to study, to grow, to just be humans, So that is something that is also my vision, my dream. And to do that, I am working on building Law Chakra. Right now, we are at the nascent stage where we are just trying to make sure that we are putting out credible information out there. We're trying to help law students and young lawyers around us in whatever way we can. This webinar is one of the ways we are trying to help in spreading information, in spreading awareness. And that is what we are trying to do right now. And slowly, hopefully, eventually, I want to convert this into a teaching law firm, like I told you. And I've already told you about myself, Advocate Sania Arora. Now, what is domestic violence? Before we proceed with, what it can be understood as in layman's terms and what it legally means, I would like to hear from you. What do you think is domestic violence? You can just unmute yourself and tell me. Or you can also write in the chat. Yes. Oh, good. Shreya, I can't hear you. Your voice is cracking.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi, Shreya.
Ma'am, domestic violence is something which affects a person's life in every way. which is physically, mentally, emotionally, and psychologically. So in
Okay.
this, we can say that it is a violation of human right. India
Mhm.
has various domestic violence cases,
Mhm.
and basically it is done with the ladies only.
Mhm.
And as per law, I don't think so, man. There is much
Mhm.
provision for any man. So
Right. Thank you.
this
Thank
is.
you for sharing it with us, Shrey. It was very helpful. You've actually
Thank you,
covered
man.
all the things that we're going to talk about in detail. So thank you. And Seema has raised her hand. Seema is saying torture, trauma. Okay. Right. Absolutely. Anybody else who would like to share what domestic violence means for them?
Can I say something, Sanya?
Yes. Yes, please, Seema.
Um, I've tolerated domestic violence for 14 years.
After?
From 14 years, I tolerated domestic violence. I got married in 2006.
Oh my God.
And 18 days after the wedding, he hit me.
Oh my God. I understand how difficult it must be for you to even be talking about it, but I applaud your courage and the fact that you're here today with us to share your experiences and to make sure that this does not get repeated with anybody else.
Yes.
And
I
I
made
hope,
a mistake by tolerating it. And I advise each and every girl and woman never make the same mistake which I did. That is why I'm here.
thank you so much, Seema. I hope you're in a better place right now. I hope that things are
Yes.
better
I
for you.
stay in Mumbai with my family, with my daughter.
Mhm. That's great, Seema. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. And this takes immense courage, and I can completely understand where you're coming from. And I hope that you know that all of us are in this together. And when we try to talk about it, and when we try to raise awareness, or when we try to tell everybody about their rights and about how they can enforce them, we need people like you to take the lead. We need people like you to have the torch in your hand. And thank you so much for being here and doing just that, Seema. Thank you. Thank you, Seema. So, as Seema rightly pointed out, and as Shay also talked about this, domestic violence is torture. And of course, we can never compete our understanding of it with somebody who's actually dealt with it, somebody who's actually been through it. But what we can do to sympathize a little, to empathize a little, to understand why this legislation is so important is to know how it can be felt, just to know how it can be meted out, just to know how it can be stopped eventually and what all it can entail. So, domestic violence is the worst form of violence. And why I say that is because it is in your own home, in your own family, in by an intimate partner, an intimate person that you have trusted. So it hurts all the more. A stranger hitting you or a stranger doing something wrong to you does not hurt you as much as somebody that you trusted not to do that. That person doing just that to you and worse is why this law is so important. And for the first time in law, domestic violence was actually defined. The definition was not clear before the legislation came up. But yes, the idea of women facing a lot of violence in their homes was not just a myth, it was a reality, it was a statistics. International conventions were talking about it. There were feminist movements, there were voices that were being raised that to spread awareness that women do face a thing like this in their own homes. And just because we say that that is a private affair of the family and should not be interfered with by the state, it is propagating, it is in a way acquiescing to what is happening to the women in that home, in that house. And that is why we need to do something to change that, which eventually led to the legislation. To put it in very simple layman's terms, before we go on to the law and the history behind it in detail, domestic violence is any behavior involving physical, psychological, emotional, sexual, or verbal abuse. So it is not just hitting or beating or slapping or throwing you out of the house or anything like that. It also includes disturbing you mentally. It also includes calling you names, insulting you, humiliating you, or even threatening to do something wrong to you. And the psychological ramifications of it are so deep and so unnerving that cannot even be discussed or covered, and that are still being studied by so many psychologists to comprehensively understand and define what psychological impact it may have on you, what emotional impact it may have on you. And that, all of that, comes under domestic violence. It is any form of aggression intended to hurt, damage, or kill an intimate person. And that is why we say domestic, because there has to be a domestic relationship in a shared household, which we will discuss, for domestic violence to take place. Now, this definition was given by Asa Dawn Brown. Asa Dawn Brown is a renowned clinician in the US, and this was one of the nearest accurate, comprehensive definitions that I could come across. Now, some of you are writing something in the chat box. Let me just read it because I want this to be conversational. Arushi is saying it can be physical, mental, financial, sexual, and a lot more. Exactly, Arushi. Sapna is saying it breaks down a person completely from inside. Yes, it does. Seema has talked about her experience. She tolerated domestic violence for 14 years, 18 days after the wedding. He hit her for the first time. They moved to US. She suffered there also. Can't even begin to tell you that. I mean, this is not even the tip of the iceberg of what Seema must have gone through and what she must be still going through. The after effects, they stay with you. And that is why the psychological impact is also very important. Now, the good thing about the law in India is for the first time, they have recognized and defined domestic violence to include psychological, physical, sexual, financial, emotional, verbal abuse. And they've also defined what it means in the law. So tomorrow, you can't just go and say that, no, this was not domestic violence, because there was no medical report saying that there were bruises on the body or there was any other such checkup or any other such a problem that happened to the woman. So this is not domestic violence. No, it can be emotional, it can be verbal, it can be mental, and that has been recognized by the law. Shreya is asking, man, dowry also amounts to such violence. Yes, asking for dowry and harassing or harming or threatening to harm the woman for not giving that dowry comes under domestic violence. So all of these laws are interconnected. Dowry prohibition, cruelty, matrimonial cruelty under Section 498A of IPC, and Domestic Violence Act. They're all interconnected. One can not necessarily be separated from the other, but the reason why this law was enacted was to provide effective reliefs, effective quick reliefs to women, because the procedure is very, very long and the procedure is very cumbersome when it comes to the other acts. So to simplify that, to make sure that the woman has quick remedies, this law was enacted, and that is exactly what we're going to discuss now. So why the law? For protection of women's rights and to prevent legal procedures from disincentivizing women from reporting cases of domestic violence. So what were these disincentives? Social backlash as well as fear of collapse of the family structure. Now it's funny that even till recent times, when there have been debates about making marital rape an offense, the former CJI, Deepak Mishra, in one of the debates in one of the cases, he just remarked that, that will lead to the breakdown of the family structure of our society. But at what cost? What family you're talking about? The family that is not safe for the women of that family. You're afraid that that family structure will break down if you make marital rape an offense, or if you talk about a woman being subjected to torture or cruelty or any other form of uh, violence at home. So the woman is always taught to be fearing the society, the family, because we can't even say when it all began, when the women became the bearer of the honor of the entire family. Women for times immemorial have been seen as the property of the man, to be given, to be protected, to be taken care of, or to be done whatever they deem fit. I was just reading a little bit more about it, and I came across this 15th century Christian, these guidelines, or some tips that were given by Christians to other Christians to take care of their women, their wives, was to, and one of those guidelines was that just beat her, just bash her if she does something that you do not approve of, because that way you'll be correcting her soul, and harm on the body is better if the soul is corrected, and that amounts to merit for you as a husband. So there were teachings like that, and there were some things like that in our own Vedas, in our own laws in early days as well, where women have been treated as subordinate to men, as properties that could be subjugated, that could be conquered, that could be done with whatever they want to do with. And that's why there was this other study by one of the socialists, Neera, and she said that women, after studying them a little bit, doing a little bit of research, and with the statistics that came up, it showed that women are seen as inherently being passionate and disloyal, and that's why it becomes a man's duty to make sure that she is on a leash. It took so long for women to fight and say that we should also be recognized as persons, as human beings, and the cruelty that's being meted out to us is a human rights violation, because we are human beings, and women sadly were always considered as the second sex. So yeah, all of those things, and the society, the stigma, the character assassination that happens is not of the man, it's of the woman, and that's why it becomes even more difficult for the woman to come out and say that okay, something wrong has happened to her, especially if it's happening within her own family. It takes a very, very long time for her to even gather the courage to come out of it. Now, Shrey has said that Honorable Supreme Court has called it a legal terrorism, and there is a bill pending in Rajya Sabha for amendment to Section 498A. Thank you for bringing that up, Shrey. We'll be discussing that. That's actually one of the slides in one of the cases that I'm going to discuss with you today. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Seema has said, I belong to Marwadi community where there is no divorce. Parents kept on advising me to tolerate it. Same advice given by maternal uncles. I am an MBA HR from University of Pune, topper in college, got my H-1B visa and started working in the US. Wow, Seema, your story is so inspiring, and you sort of you personify what so many women go through on a daily basis. No matter how educated they are, no matter how well off they are independently, there is still this stigma attached. And it's often said that, you should do everything in your power to adjust, to deal with it, to tolerate it. And you don't even realize when you've internalized those values and you start doing it, and it takes half of your life away. You'd like to say something, Seema?
Yes.
Yes, Seema.
All I want to say is that both of us were toppers. My hubby was in the US. He did his MS from UTD Dallas. Both of us were toppers. So it was an alliance which was considered the best. We got married in Kathmandu, Nepal, and I was being told that उसके वजह से मैं यूएस गई. सीमा ने कौन सा यूएस देखा था? हमारे बेटे की वजह से सीमा यूएस गई. सीमा की औकात नहीं थी यूएस जाने की.
I'm so
I
sorry.
started working there, kept on tolerating domestic violence, got my H1B. Luckily, my name got featured in the lottery system in 2007. Domestic violence continued. In US, it's a crime. If I wanted, I could have ruined his entire career.
Yeah.
But I know the implications of it.
And you still chose to protect him.
Because I know he would lose his SSN, it would impact his career. He would be blacklisted all over US. And indirectly, it would affect me. And my uncles, everyone kept on telling me, ki nahi, सहन करो.
I understand.
And then they advised me to start a family.
Wow.
And then
Hoping that having kids will make it better.
yes. See, because my parents wanted the best of it. Like no parent would want their daughter to suffer.
Yeah.
So they thought that if domestic violence, the one way to stop domestic violence is agar if I conceive and if I have a child, it would improve our relationship.
Yes. That's what everybody actually tends to think. And yes, you're absolutely right. They're trying to act in the best interest of their children, their daughters. But that is also what they have been taught by the society. And
Till
you,
date, I've always listened to what my parents say. That is the upbringing which they have given us all. We are 4 children, so we can never go against the wishes of our parents.
yes, you're absolutely right, Seema. I'm so proud of you for having the courage to talk to us, Seema. I'm so proud of you. You're giving context to what we are talking about just theoretically today. Thank you so much. Ravinderjeet has written, Seema, you are an inspiration for us. Lots of love and strength.
Thank you so much. But I
Thank
don't
you.
want any other girl to undergo what I have gone through. I want that the day first time he hit me, I should have taken action. That's my biggest regret. That's my biggest mistake which I made.
I totally agree with you, Seema, but you also cannot beat yourself up over it because you don't know at that time. You're so intimately connected and with the all the upbringing and everything that you have forsaken for that particular relationship to work. You can't really be sure if this was just a one-time event or if this can happen again. And
Yes, that is what I thought, that हो
yeah.
सकता है कि नहीं अभी फैमिली में है इसलिए हो रहा है, यूएस जाके सब ठीक हो जाएगा. But I was wrong.
Yeah. And we often tend to apologize a lot for things that are not our fault. We become very apologetic and we start becoming very protective of the person who's not been protecting us. That's where the love and the sympathy and the care of a woman comes in. So don't blame yourself for it. It's because of people like you that we still have courage, we still have strength, and we have hope for a better future. Thank you, Seema. See, everybody is writing such beautiful things about you. Kumar Raj Dubey has written, Seema ma'am, you're very good enough for this life. And this is our pride. We are listening to you. Please don't cry. You're a role model for us. Shrey has written, fear of society and relative pressures gives more wings to people who do such heinous acts. Seema ma'am, you're very courageous. And Vishaka has written, your story is so inspiring, Seema ma'am. Listening to you gives us power to stand up for ourselves. See, Seema, something good came out of it after all. Thank you so much for talking. And you can always unmute yourself and talk if there's anything you'd like to add. Thank you so much. So that is what domestic violence does to you, everybody. And why the law? Because we needed effective, quick remedies. In addition to the 498A, in addition to the Dowry Prohibition Act, because this particular legislation not only defines domestic violence comprehensively, including the psychological, financial, verbal, and emotional abuse, in addition to the sexual abuse, the physical abuse, but it also gives quick remedies. There are protection orders that can be sought. There are residence orders that can be sought. We'll talk about them in detail in the further slides. And that all of those reliefs can be asked for while the case is still pending in the court. So you can ask for ex parte ad interim orders. Ex parte means in the absence of the opposite party. So even if the respondent refuses to show up and to come and give their defense, even if they refuse to, just say what exactly happened in their own version, the court, in their absence, can give you interim reliefs, which are extremely, extremely helpful, extremely useful for women today. Now, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, it enshrines principles of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So CEDAW is a very, very important convention when it comes to women's rights and equality. So it was ratified by India in 1993. CEDAW's 12th general recommendation required the state parties. So India was one of the state parties. It required the state parties to protect women against violence of any kind occurring within the family, at the workplace, or in any other area of social life. So it was recognized that it's within the family that is the easiest for a woman to be abused, and it is within the family that the woman needs to be protected. And it's following this recommendation that the 2005 Act was enacted. And if you can recall, the Protection of Women from Sexual Harassment at Workplace that came in 2013 after the Vishaka guidelines, that was also inspired by this recommendation to protect women at workplace as well. Again, I'm opening the chat box. Sadia has written, thank you so much for sharing, Seema ma'am, and please make yourself bold and brave and love yourself and make yourself a good human being, and your inspection today, again, think for it. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that I'm amidst such good people, people who encourage each other, people who love each other, people who are kind to each other. I'm blessed to have all of you today. Vishaka has asked, what about girls being told to marry instead of continuing to work for their goals? Does that amount to DV? Yes, Vishaka, that does amount to emotional abuse, which is a part of domestic violence. Okay, Seema is also sharing more of her story in the chat box. And we will continue reading the story, and we will continue discussing what Seema has gone through and making sure that nobody else has to go through that. In the meanwhile, while Seema completes her story in the chat box, I will be going ahead with the presentation. So now that I hope you've understood a little bit of why this law was important and why it was enacted, now we'll understand what the law says, what domestic violence means. So as per Section 3 of the Act, which is the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, any act which can be a commission or an omission. So please be careful while you're reading to understand what a provision says. It includes omission. Omission means when you choose not to do anything. So a commission or an omission that harasses, harms, injures, endangers, threatens the health, safety, well-being, life of the woman. So it not only includes the act which was committed or omitted that harassed or harmed or injured or endangered, but it also includes the threat of it. So anything that is being done or not being done that threatens the health, safety, well-being, or the life of the woman, which includes physical, verbal, emotional, sexual, and economic abuse. So in this, the definition clearly defines what physical abuse is, what verbal and emotional abuse is, what sexual abuse is, what economic abuse is. To give you a basic idea, physical abuse is the physical beating, the physical torture, the physical cruelty that is being subjected to a woman. So it can be in the form of a slap, it can be in the form of just hitting her with something else, or just throwing her out of the home forcefully, or anything that leaves a mark, or even if it doesn't leave a mark on her body but has been physically subjected to her. Then verbal and emotional abuse can include name calling, insulting, humiliating, for saying things for not having a male child, saying things for not doing enough for the family, or not giving enough dowry, or by completely emotionally trying to subjugate her by telling her, okay, you can't go out at this particular time, you can't be doing this, confining a woman or the woman's child in her home against her wishes, not allowing her to meet anybody, not allowing her to do a job, not allowing her to marry somebody that she wants to. Now, you have to understand this. A grieved person in this particular act not only includes a wife or a live-in partner, but it also includes a mother, a daughter, a sister, anybody else, any other woman that's living in the home, in the domestic setting, and it is a shared household, and that woman is being subjected to abuse of any kind. That woman is also considered to be an aggrieved woman under this act. So if you're forcing her to marry somebody that she doesn't want to marry, or not work and get married, or like somebody just asked, or not continue her studies, or not allow her to go to school or college, all of that comes under emotional abuse, emotional and verbal abuse. Then sexual abuse, we all know, humiliating a woman, um, taking away her dignity, doing things that are not consented to by the woman. That comes under sexual abuse. And economic abuse includes depriving the woman of the resources to fend for herself. First, not allowing her to work, and then even when she works, taking away all of her money, all of her savings, all of her resources, so she doesn't have anything by herself, to herself, to protect herself, or to financially support herself, to induce and to propagate dependency on the man or the partner, or the abuser. So taking away all of her financial resources, that comes under economic abuse. Again, this is just to give you a brief understanding of what it means. Depending on the factual matrix of the case, depending on what has actually happened, a lot, it is like a blanket provision. It can cover any and every kind of situation. So that depends on what the situation is and how you spin it. Now, quickly going through some important definitions under the act. A grieved person is any woman. Now, like Shrey had rightly pointed out, a man does not have a remedy in this particular act. It's only a woman who lives or has lived in a shared household. So, shared household is defined under Section 2S of the Act, and it's important for you to understand what it means to even be able to figure out whether this person is aggrieved or not. So they have to be living in a shared household. So it doesn't matter how long you live together, or do you still live together, but you have to have lived together in a shared household with the respondent. So as I told you, it includes sister, mother, daughter, any other female family member, doesn't just have to be a wife. Then what is a domestic relationship? They have to be in a domestic relationship as well. So a domestic relationship, as defined under Section 2F of the Act, says that it is between any two persons who live, or at any point of time they have lived together in a shared household, when they are related by consanguinity. Consanguinity is by being related by blood, by marriage, or through a relationship in the nature of marriage, which covers your live-in relationships, adoption, or are family members living together as a joint family. So if you're living together in a shared household and you're a woman and you are related to the abuser who has meted out domestic violence on you, then you have a remedy as an aggrieved person under this law. Now, what does respondent mean? Now, this is also a very important definition, which actually gave rise to a landmark judgment also later, which we will talk about in the next slide. So, respondent is any adult male. So, he has to be an adult, he has to be a male who lives or lived in a shared household with the respondent, with the not the respondent, with the aggrieved person, including his relatives. So, a person, an adult male who has been the abuser, as well as his relatives, are can be respondents under this act. Now, respondents are the opposite party, the people, the person against whom a case can be filed under the Domestic Violence Act. So, it includes a live-in relationship also. Now, what is a shared household? A shared household is where an aggrieved person, or an aggrieved person has at any stage lived in a domestic relationship. So we know domestic relationship is the intimate relationship. It can be by blood, it can be by adoption, it can be by marriage, or in the nature of marriage. So that is a domestic relationship, either singly or along with the respondent, and includes such a household where, whether owned or tenanted, either jointly by the aggrieved person and the respondent, or owned or tenanted by either of them. So the ownership is not of prime significance at this point. To simplify this for you, a shared household is where the aggrieved person has lived or continues to live. So it doesn't have to be with her male partner, even if she's lived there alone with the male partner's relatives for a while. That can also be a shared household. Now, it has to be a place which is rented by either of them, or which is owned by either of them, or which is a joint family, a house of the joint family of the respondent, or the aggrieved person also. So they have to be in a shared household, in a domestic relationship, in order to be an aggrieved person under this act. Now, this is a very important judgment. Hiral P. Harsora versus Kusum Narottam Das Harsora. Now, I will not take you through the entire judgment. You can read up more about it on your own, and we're anyway also short on time. But why you need to understand this judgment is because it was a landmark judgment which came in 2016, where the Supreme Court said that the respondent, the words adult male from the respondent should be struck down. So it can be any person. So since we have already established that domestic violence can be done by the relatives of the husband as well, or it can be done on the relatives of the male person over there as well. So a respondent can also be a woman. Respondent can be a mother-in-law, respondent can be a sister-in-law, respondent can be the daughters of your brother or your husband, anybody. So in this particular case, what had happened was a mother-daughter, they had filed a case under domestic violence against their son or brother, their brother's wife, and their two daughters, saying that they had been subjected to domestic violence by the brother or the son, his wife, and their daughters. The respondents here argued that the definition of respondent under this particular section under the Act includes adult male. So the wife and the daughters cannot be arrayed in the list of parties as the respondent. And this then led to the Supreme Court saying that no, the words adult male do not go with the objects and the reasons of this act, and that's why they should be struck down. Although it is important for you to know that there has been no amendment in the Domestic Violence Act 2005 to actually bring that into the legislation by the parliament, although the Supreme Court has struck down the words adult male. Now, another important judgment, S.R. Batra versus Taruna Batra. Again, law students, lawyers, you can read up more about this judgment. This was a 2007 judgment that came where, interestingly, the meaning of shared household was discussed, and the court held, the Supreme Court held, that when you're asking for residence orders, and we'll talk about residence orders in detail in the shared household, the shared household means only the house that is owned by the husband or tenanted by the husband, but does not include the house that is independently owned by the mother-in-law. So in this case, the house, the shared household where the woman wanted to go back to and reside peacefully because she had been kicked out of that house and she wanted to go back to that house, the Supreme Court held that she can't do that because the house is owned by the mother-in-law and that does not entitle her to go and stay there. This was a very problematic judgment. There were several judgments that came after this. This was in 2007. And there was a judgment that came by Delhi High Court in 2010. Evneet Singh, if I'm not wrong, I can't recall the exact name, but I can give it to you later. So that judgment, in that judgment, the Delhi High Court specifically said that the ownership of the house is not in question here. You know, what matters is that there has to be a domestic relationship and there has to be domestic violence. So in order to determine domestic violence, what is important is to see if there was a domestic relationship or not. It doesn't matter if the house is owned by the husband or the husband's father or mother. And similarly, another judgment came in 2010 by Bombay High Court, which again they said that this is not the object of the act, and you have to understand and interpret the provisions with the object and the statement of object and the reason why this act was enacted in the first place, which again says that meaning of shared household can be where they were living in a domestic relationship. It doesn't have to specify that this was owned by the husband or whoever else owned it. As long as they lived together there and there was domestic violence there was a domestic relationship, it is a shared household. Interestingly, in 2018, there was another judgment that came by Supreme Court and Delhi High Court, which upheld the precedent of S.R. Batra and again said that, okay, if the property is owned by the mother-in-law, then the daughter-in-law cannot enter that house again because that is not owned by the husband, that is owned by the mother-in-law. So yeah, this is quite interesting and problematic, and you can read up more about it. Before moving further, there are a lot of messages in the chat box. I'll just see what you are saying to all of us. So just to make sure that you're not getting bored. Okay, so Seema has said that her gynae confirmed pregnancy. Same day, her in-laws came to New Jersey, US. 4 months of torture and trauma. Again, had severe hypermesis, morning sickness, was admitted to hospital. Oh my God, he hit me in the hospital room as well. I'm so sorry. Threw hot iron on me also in front of his parents. Luckily, I survived. See, when you say that this happened in front of his parents, a lot of the times in the cases that I've also seen in domestic violence, people say that, you know, mother-in-law, father-in-law are not involved because they did not actively do anything. But they didn't do anything to stop it either. So there is that omission there. So they are also implicated. Seema, you're trying to say something?
Yes, in fact, I would want to share what happened that day.
Yeah.
He was ironing his clothes and I was making breakfast.
Yeah.
And he got angry on me and he just threw whatever is there in his hand, he just throws it off. That is his normal behavior. He just threw it on me. Luckily, I just moved back and I locked myself in the bedroom. And his dad called my father in Pune to complain about me.
To complain about
गलती
you.
yeah, गलती उसने की पर blame मेरे पे आता है हमेशा.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm so glad you're out of it, Seema. I'm so glad.
It took me a lot of courage.
I'm sure.
My case is there in the court, so I'm not sure whether I can share, but I think I have to share. I want the world to know that this is not acceptable. Seema ne sahan kiya hai, but I don't want any other girl to undergo the same trauma and torture I have gone through.
This is not acceptable. You're absolutely right, Seema.
In fact, in Jersey City, when he hit me, he threw the laptop. The wall got damaged, the phone got damaged because it's of wood, or everything is wooden there.
Hmm.
And I went out of the home crying. The building supervisor saw me crying. So, but obvious, if a girl is crying in US, there is something going on.
Yeah.
Cops came home. They questioned me. At that time, also, I saved him. I told that no, we have just shifted to the apartment. It was just a minor argument.
Wow.
In fact, I welcomed them home. I asked them for tea, coffee. The lady officer. If I wanted, I could have ruined him completely.
Yes. I'm leaning on the side that you should have actually. But
That's a mistake which I made. But being in HR, I knew the implications of it. So,
yeah, you still had the
I
heart.
don't know. My only question is I don't know being in HR was a plus point or a minus point for me.
I think you're just a
Belong-
bigger person. You're just
and
a bigger
I
person.
don't understand belonging to the Marwari family was a drawback or an advantage because it saved him for 12 years. It saved him.
But then, as they say that, kabhi na kabhi to ghada bharta hai papa ko.
That
Ultimately,
is
you
what
have,
has happened. That is what has happened right now.
yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad it has happened. Thank you, Seema. So Shrey has said it's my personal experience in a case that women going through such humiliation just because she can't go back to her maternal home. That is also true. A lot of the times it happens that you think you don't have a choice. So, you just can't do anything about this. Just that we can have conversations, we can try to make each other understand our points of view, and also try to talk to our parents and have more gender sensitization drives to make sure that this does not get repeated, that the girl doesn't feel like she doesn't have anywhere else to go. So Sadia has said, I always handle domestic life only women. So Sadia, I think what you're trying to say is that why only women have to deal with all of this? It happens actually with men also, but the situations, the circumstances are very different, and a lot of the times there's this hue and cry about this not being a gender neutral act and not having any remedy for men going through cruelty by women and everything, things like that. But historically, there have been so many injustices. There have been so many incidents where women have suffered so much for so long at the hands of men that these legislations are important to protect the lives of women more than anything else right now. Achintya has said, hi, I asked this from the perspective of social legal research. Can we use the number of cases registered under Section 498A of IPC measure the extent of domestic violence? I ask this because this number is regularly put in the public domain through crime in India reports published by NCRB. However, to the best of my knowledge, there is no such public source that discloses the number of cases under PWDVA. Now, you're absolutely right, Achintya. And although these cases are usually interconnected, a lot of the times when something like this happens, because matrimonial cruelty is there, so the woman has the right to go under Section 498A IPC also, and the magistrate in this particular act also has the power to have a separate case going under 498A while the domestic violence case is pending. But the using that data for this, I don't think, in my personal opinion, will be accurate, because that a lot of the times when those cases are going on, then domestic violence cases might not have been filed at all also, so you can't really be sure. If you need data on the number of domestic violence cases, then I would suggest you go to ECO's website. I am not sure if there is any statistics available at any reliable source, government source online, but you can always search for domestic violence cases on ECO's website, and it gives you the number of cases that are pending. I think that can help you. So Sadia says it's good thinking. Go ahead, we'll save a lot of time. Seema ma'am. Monica says, how can we prove domestic violence? So this in practical scheme of things, a lot of the times there are WhatsApp chats, there are emails, there are accounts of relatives and friends and neighbors. And of course, in this act itself, there's a provision that says that in certain circumstances, the sole testimony of the aggrieved person is enough to prove. Okay, so we will discuss that also in just a little bit. Now just moving on, since we are running out of time. It was supposed to be over in 1 hour, and 1 hour is over already, and there's a lot I need to cover. So I'll just quickly cover this and we'll keep our conversation going. So another case, Lalita Tapo versus State of Jharkhand and another. This was another recent Supreme Court judgment that categorically held that maintenance can be claimed under the provisions of the DV Act, even if the claimant is not a legally wedded wife, and therefore not entitled to claim maintenance under Section 125 of the CRPC. So Section 125 CRPC entitles a wife to claim maintenance. This act allows a live-in partner to also claim maintenance. Now, Indira Sharma versus VKV Sharma. Now, here, the guidelines for live-in relationships to be in the nature of marriage were given. There was another Supreme Court case before this, Elu Swami, I think, I can't recall the name right now, which gave the guidelines. Now, the act categorically says in the nature of marriage. The Supreme Court interpreted that to also include live-in relationships. But what will be a live-in relationship and what will not be a live-in relationship, for that certain guidelines were given by the Supreme Court, such as duration of the relationship, shared household, pooling of resources and financial arrangements, domestic arrangements, sexual relationship, children, socialization in public, intention and conduct of the parties. So going out in public as a couple, but not legally married, then you are, in a live-in relationship. But in this particular case, what had happened was the man was living with the woman. The man was married and the woman was unmarried. And the woman knew that the man was married, and the man had been living with her for 18 years. They also had a son together. And the woman then went under DV Act and eventually said that I need reliefs under the DV Act because I have been subjected to domestic violence. The court held that this was not a live-in relationship. Why? Because the woman already knew that the man was married, had a legally wedded wife and children from that wife. And that is why she was very well aware of the fact that she was just a mistress or, a keep. And that does not come under the definition of in the nature of marriage. So the Supreme Court also said that, if you're living only on the living together only on the weekends, or if it's a one night stand, or if it's a situation like this, it's not in the nature of marriage, and that's why you're not entitled to be an aggrieved person under this act. Now we'll go to the procedure. What is the phase? What are the phases of dealing with it? What happens before you file the application under the Section 12 of Domestic Violence Act? What happens during the case, and what happens once the case has been decided, once the proceedings are over. Now, pre-application. So before an application actually goes to the magistrate, what can happen is anyone can inform. Anyone means anyone. You don't have to have a locus standi to say that, okay, I know this woman, I am related to this woman, or I am a neighbor of this woman, or whatever. If you know of any woman who has been through or is going through domestic violence, then you can go to the nearest police station, you can go to a protection officer, you can also go to the magistrate directly, you can go to a service provider, you can tell them that I know of this person who has been going through this. And that is the first step to take. Now, who is a protection officer? A protection officer can be anyone that has been appointed by the state government to be a protection officer. That person should have been working in the social sector for 3 years. And once they get appointed, they have to work as protection officers for 3 years. And their job is basically to take care of situations like these, to be accessible to women or people who can tell or help those women, to make sure that there is, there is awareness, to make sure that the woman knows her rights, to make sure that the domestic incident report is prepared properly according to the law, to tell the magistrate the facts, to guide and assist the woman. All of those things are done by the protection officers, and every state appoints protection officers. Now that can be read about more on under Section 4 of the Act. Now, what is a domestic incident report? I'll also show you a format if the time permits. It is actually a form where, based on the information received, you tick, okay, so has there been physical abuse? Has there been verbal abuse, sexual, emotional, when it happened, how it happened? And those details are supposed to be in the domestic incident report, which goes to the magistrate eventually. Now, the police officer, you can directly go to the police officer. There are women's cells, and they can also register a case under the Domestic Violence Act. And you can also go to a service provider. Service provider can be a lawyer, can be a medical professional, can be a shelter home, can be a counselor, and you can inform them. And the service provider's duty is to prepare an application to go to the magistrate and to take further actions and to assist the woman to take further actions. Now, as per Section 5, the aggrieved person is to be informed about the complaint or the information so received, and also about her rights. So if she has the right to free legal aid, she should know that. If she has the right to get interim relief, she should know that. If she has the right to stay in the house where she's staying without being expelled, she should know that. And it becomes the duty of the protection officer, the police officer, service provider, or the magistrate to tell the woman about her rights and to make an application under this act to avail free legal services, to lodge a complaint under Section 498A IPC. So if the woman wants to go wants to press criminal charges against the man, she can do that also. And how she's supposed to do that, you can provide assistance to her as a protection officer, police officer, etc. in that regard also. Now, what is the court procedure? The first thing that happens is an application goes under Section 12 to the magistrate, judicial magistrate first class, or the metropolitan magistrate within the territorial jurisdiction. Now, how to determine jurisdiction is given under Section 27. Now, for those of you who are not lawyers or law students, jurisdiction means the area or the subject matter, or the type of cases that can be taken by a particular type of court, that the court has the power to decide those cases. So the power of the court to decide those cases is the jurisdiction. And how to make jurisdiction in domestic violence case is first, as per Section 27, where the woman temporarily or permanently resides. So jurisdiction can be made out there also. So temporarily can be, for example, if you were living in Bangalore with your husband and then you came back to Gurgaon because of everything that happened, then you don't have to file a case in Bangalore. You can file a case under domestic violence in Gurgaon also, because you're temporarily residing here. Or it can be where where the respondent is residing or working. So there is no temporarily provision for the respondent. And or it can be in a place within the territorial jurisdiction of which the domestic violence has happened. So if it has happened in say Madhya Pradesh, then the case can be filed in Madhya Pradesh. So it depends. Again, the act takes care of the convenience and the comfort of the aggrieved person. Then the first date of hearing is ideally supposed to be within 3 days from the date of receipt of the application. Sadly, it doesn't happen like that in real life. It takes a month to even get the summons processed. And after that, you get another date after, say, 2 months or 3 months. It doesn't happen as quickly as ideally it should be. Notice of hearing to be served by the protection officer within 2 days. Now, within 2 days from the date of receipt of application, the notice should be served on the respondent saying this case has been filed against you and you are supposed to appear on this particular date to the court to give your defense. And the date of hearing should be ideally within 3 days. But that does not really, again, happen as quickly. Now, Sadia has said, I'm reading a lot of cases about it, but I'm just always receiving news and judgment about domestic violence against women and a little bit about men. And I know it's going with men also, but why it's going with more women? Sadia, again, this is a social legal question. It happens. It has always happened like this, and that's why women are more vulnerable. Monica has said, if husband is not paying maintenance for wife and children, can she claim the amount from husband? Yes, of course she can. Of course she can. Even if she's working or capable of working, but if she's earning less than the husband, she can always go and claim maintenance, not only under Section 125 of CRPC, but also under this particular act. Interim maintenance can also be awarded. You can also go for maintenance under Hindu Marriage Act. So, Kumar Raj Dubey has said chapter 9 of CRPC. Yes, chapter 9 of CRPC is for maintenance. So, okay, great. Now, moving on, I keep reading your messages in between to make sure that, okay, yeah, I'm in the loop of the conversation you're having, and we are having this conversation. It's not a monologue. So, moving on, the first date of hearing within 3 days. So, we've talked about this. Then, ex parte interim orders can be passed, like I told you in the beginning. In the absence of the respondent, some interim orders can be passed. Interim means while the case is still going on, you can ask for certain reliefs. We're going to talk about those reliefs in the next slide. And you can ask for those reliefs in the meantime, even in the absence of the respondent. This can be read more about under section 23 of the Act. Then the magistrate shall endeavor to dispose of within 60 days from the first date of hearing, has the power to award penalties. So yes, again, within 60 days of the first date of hearing, from the first date of hearing, the matter should be disposed of ideally, but practically it doesn't happen like that. Then if you're aggrieved by the order that has been passed by the magistrate, you can always appeal to the Sessions Court within 30 days from the receipt of the order, as per section 29. Now, what are the orders or the powers of the magistrate? The magistrate can pronounce protection order. So protection order can restrain the respondent from continuing the acts of domestic violence. They can restrain the respondent from entering the shared household where the woman is residing or the children are residing. The magistrate can restrain the respondent from entering the workplace of the woman, or from calling the woman, or from threatening the woman or her relatives or her colleagues or anybody that she knows in any way whatsoever, or contacting them also. So protection orders can be passed under section 18. Residence orders that we have been talking about, the woman is entitled to stay in the shared household, and she's also entitled to feel secure. So protection orders can be passed in conjunction with the residence orders, where the woman can be given the right to reside where she has been residing, and she doesn't have to be evicted or go back to her parents' place or anywhere else. And the respondent can be restrained from continuing the acts of domestic violence. Now, if they're living in a rented accommodation, the respondent can be mandated to keep paying the rent, to not harass her like that. And if he can't pay the rent there, then he has to provide an equal accommodation in some other place to the woman, has to take care of the accommodation of the woman. And monetary reliefs can be granted. So here you can ask for interim, not interim can be in section 23, but here you can ask for maintenance also. You can ask for medical bills also. So if there has been any expenses on account of your health, on account of how much you've suffered, you can ask for compensation and monetary reliefs. And in this case, the magistrate goes as per the CRPC. So there are bonds that can be signed, and if the bonds are broken, then the person can be jailed who's breaking the bonds. So they have to furnish a certain amount, and the judge can order, the magistrate can order what amount has to be furnished or how it is to be paid. If the respondent says that I can't pay, I don't have any money, the magistrate can straight away go to the employer or the debtor or anybody else that has the money that is related to respondent, and say that you have to directly deposit this amount to the agreed person's account. And if they don't oblige, or if they don't agree, if they don't pay on time, then the magistrate can move as per the provisions of the CRPC and arrest the wrongdoer. Now, compensation orders also, compensation for the mental agony, for the torture, for the cruelty, for what you have suffered, you can ask for compensation as well. Now, interim ex parte orders, so all of these orders can be given in the interim mode also, in the absence of the respondent. So you can go to the judge and say that I need to be protected immediately. And so the protection orders can be given interim basis, also residence orders, while the case is still pending and the final orders are to be passed. Now, there can be penalty for breach of protection orders. Now, the protection orders, if they are breached, if say you're saying that you're restrained, the respondent restrained from entering the workplace of the wife or the aggrieved person, and he does that anyway, then there is penalty. So as per section 31, they can the respondent can be arrested for imprisonment for up to 1 year and a fine of 20,000 rupees. So there's penalty. And then there's penalty for not discharging duty by protection officer. If the protection officer does not help, or the protection officer colludes with the respondent, or does not do his or her job properly, then they can also be punished. They can also be penalized under section 33 of the act. Now you have to understand, protection order, residence order, monetary release, all of these are civil relief, civil remedies, and the procedure is simplified. If the protection order is breached, then it becomes a criminal offense, which is cognizable. Cognizable is that it has to be taken into account by the police. The police can arrest the person directly. It is a cognizable offense. And similarly, you can seek criminal reliefs also here. So this is CASI civil and CASI criminal. So it's a mixture of both, and criminal procedure code is used as the procedure to make sure that the respondent obliges, the respondent abides by the orders and takes it more seriously, while the procedure is simplified to make sure that quick relief is provided to the aggrieved person as well. Now, what happens once the case is over, once the proceedings are over? Copies of the orders are to be given free of cost as per section 24. Court has the power to alter, modify, revoke the order on being satisfied that there has been change of circumstance. So an application has to be filed if the order has to be modified by either party, and that application gets decided by the court, and then the court will modify or alter the order that has already been passed or revoked. Now, protection order under section 18, this is very important. It remains in force until and unless the aggrieved person applies for discharge. So until and unless the aggrieved person says that I don't need this protection order anymore, the protection order will remain in force. If you are unhappy with the order, you can file an appeal within 30 days, as we just discussed. And if the protection order is breached, then the respondent can be punished for imprisonment up to 1 year or fine up to 20,000 rupees, as we just discussed. Now, there have been a lot of instances of misuse of the law as well. And there have been a lot of debates around this, that the man does not have any remedy. And a lot of the times this is used as legal terrorism, like Shrey just told you. So this was another case where Major Singh and another versus Sarabjit Kaur. So what happened in this case was that the wife was having an extramarital affair, and the husband found out, and they were living abroad, and the wife used to come back to India often without him, and then used to have an affair, and the husband found out. The husband requested for her to first leave the boyfriend and come and live with him, but she still continued her relationship. And the when the husband said, okay, let's file for divorce, she didn't. They filed for mutual consent divorce, and she didn't show up, only to sign the papers. So the husband was left with no remedy, and he filed a report in the police. He said that my wife is having an adulterous relationship, and she hasn't shown up for the divorce also, and I'm going back now, and things like that. So the wife got pissed off, and as a counterblast, what she did was she filed cases under section 498A, filed case under domestic violence, and just to harass him and his family, because she wanted to keep uh, getting money from him. So this also happened, and here the Punjab and Haryana High Court said that this is legal terrorism and it shouldn't happen. Now it's because of misuse of the law like this that a lot of the times people who actually need these remedies, people who actually have a genuine case, they also suffer sometimes because of how rampantly it is being misused. Now another case, that was Ashish Dikshit versus State of UP. So in this, what happened was that the woman, she implicated not just the husband and the in-laws, but also the husband's friends, colleagues, the husband's tenant that she did not even know the name of. So she made the tenant also a party as a respondent. And here the Supreme Court said that you cannot be doing that. You cannot be implicating everybody. It just shows the non-seriousness of your complaint, and ultimately how this act can be misused. Now, some popularly debated shortcomings of this act are that if there's a false complaint that is filed by the informant or the woman, then there's no punishment for this. And that's why, since there's no liability, then you can't really do anything about it, and so it leads to more harassment in cases which are fabricated. Then there are debates saying that there is no grievance redressal for falsely accused men. Then there is multiplicity of proceedings. So the provisions and the reliefs under this act can be going on simultaneously with other cases that have been filed by the same aggrieved person against the same abuser. So there's multiplicity of proceedings. Then in some such instances, sole testimony of women is enough. So section 32 talks about the proof and the cognizance that we were just discussing. So in that, it has been said that if there is a breach of protection order, then the sole testimony of the woman is enough to say that, okay, yes, there has been a breach, and the man, the respondent, the accused, can be punished accordingly just on the basis of the sole testimony of the woman. Now, what I have to say to all of that is, yes, there are shortcomings. There are shortcomings to everything. There are drawbacks to everything. There's lack of implementation, there's lack of understanding, lack of awareness. And yes, a lot of laws get misused, they get abused. The biggest example is the law of sedition. How often is that abused and misused, and how many debates are going on around that? But that does not mean that you should completely take away those reliefs, or you should completely nullify the reason and the intention with which those reliefs or those legislations were enacted. They were to protect women, and there's a reason to protect women. What we can do is, yes, we can make it better. We can make the implementation better. My suggestions are that we should have frequent gender sensitization programs in schools, especially where children who are at an impressionable age, they can understand what it means to respect a woman, and they should be taught to respect not just a woman but another human being, and what is right and what is wrong, and how they have to be sensitive to every person exercising their rights as human rights. So gender sensitization workshops, gender neutral amendments can be made. So just like adult male was taken away from respondent, maybe aggrieved person can be a man also under this act. And there can be more focus on mediation. So section 14 of this act talks about mediation. So maybe mediation can be mandatory, and there can be more focus on making sure that the disputes are resolved amicably. More awareness and better investigation. You can't say that this law is being misused and that's why this law has to go. No, there has to be better investigation to make sure that false cases do not go after a certain level, and people are not harassed unnecessarily if there is no merit to the case. So, and also clubbing domestic violence cases with matrimonial matters. So section 498A, domestic violence, divorce cases on the basis of cruelty or anything else, all of these cases can be clubbed, and these cases can be taken up by family court, and maybe, so that there is some sort of convenience when it comes to the hearings that are taking place, when it comes to running from one courtroom to another, explaining the facts over and over to different judges, so it gets easier. Then we can also have bar on multiplicity of proceedings like we do in civil cases, that if there is a case pending against the same person by the same person, then you don't go for that case. So these are some suggestions. Finally, yes, we've come to the end of the presentation. You can reach out to me at lawchakrabaisani@gmail.com, and you can also keep in touch with me on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We have a YouTube channel as well. Now I'm going to stop share. I feel like I've been talking forever, and thank you so much for such a patient hearing. So now let's quickly have a discussion. What do you think? Yes.
I have few doubts. Please
Yes.
explain me.
Yes, please, Monica, please tell me.
Yeah. The first doubt is, can a wife withdraw the case in the middle of the trial and all if husband promises her that he will take care of kids and he'll take care of wife?
Yeah.
From now he'll not trouble. Can she withdraw the case?
yes, she can withdraw the case, and it's always advisable to have an MOU or a settlement agreement to have all of these terms in writing and to have set deadlines and set expectations.
Okay.
So,
Do we get any protection order from court at that time, ma'am?
you can always withdraw the case if you want to withdraw the case, but when you're withdrawing the case, you're also saying that you don't need the protection order anymore if you've been granted the protection order. But what you can do is you can request the judge saying that you have the liberty to come back again if the person does not abide by the terms of settlement.
Okay. Okay. You mean that if the after going back to husband home, if he again started troubling,
Yes, so you have
then
the
she can
liberty.
reopen the case.
Yes, you can always get that written in the order.
Do we have any limitation, ma'am, for that?
No,
No
it depends on
limitation.
the cause of action. It's
That is so
continuous.
nice, ma'am. Seriously, that is so nice.
I'm glad.
And one more thing, ma'am. Now, nowadays, most of we are not able to see the joint families. Like both husband and wife are working in the metropolitan cities. The in-laws are in the villages or like that, right? My doubt is if husband and wife both are living separately without in-laws, and what how she can prove he is abusing her, and he pretends as if he's taking care of her a lot, and he is loving his wife a lot, but how the woman can prove, ma'am, in these
Okay.
situations?
Okay. So Monica, one question. So the in-laws are not living with
Yes,
the
ma'am.
couple.
Yes, yeah.
But are the in-laws constantly talking to the husband and telling the husband how he should
Yes,
be?
ma'am, but they will never say good words to husband. If he abuses also, just they will be silent.
Yes, great. Okay. So like we talked about this, a lot of the times, a lot of the cases I've heard where this happens, and the in-laws are also implicated for not doing anything to rectify the situation to protect them. And if you're not saying anything, it means you are agreeing with what the abuser is doing. First of
Yes,
all,
ma'am. That is omission.
that is omission. So the in-laws are also liable. The second thing is that the way to prove it is what we do in practical scheme of things. Seema, I'm just muting you. Yeah. So what we do in practical scheme of things is that we ask the woman to first collect some evidence in terms of what she's gone through. She can write an email or a WhatsApp message to the husband saying that, okay, this is what has been happening. This is not right. I don't appreciate it, or anything that she's feeling, or that you've hurt me, you've abused me, or whatever has happened. Just put it either as a WhatsApp or an email, and even if the husband does not respond to it, at least this has been gone, this is gone in the knowledge. So when you talk about the timeline, when you talk about the dates and events, you have clarity. Okay, this is what had happened and this is the message that I sent. Then there are also call recordings that are being used extensively to show that okay, this actually happened. So call recordings with transcripts. There is under section 65B of Indian Evidence Act, you can attach WhatsApp messages, emails, and the call recordings as evidence of what you're trying to prove. And a lot of the times, given the situation and the facts and whatever has happened, it becomes by the testimony of the woman only, by what she's gone through, it becomes apparent to the judge. Whether the case has merit or not, and that's how the judge also decides whether to give interim relief or not. So if it has actually happened, then the series of events and everything will be very logical, very natural, and the way to prove is these messages.
Ma'am, if we don't have any WhatsApp recordings, WhatsApp messages or any recordings, means the thing will happen among the four walls, no, ma'am. Nobody will see. How
Yeah.
can?
No, so when it is happening, when it is still happening, we recommend that you send a message. So there is
Not, ma'am, like that. Actually, I know a case where she abused by her husband a lot. Immediately, she came to mother's home.
Okay.
So from then she don't have any evidences, but she was literally she was crying a lot
Okay.
because of his abuse and all.
Mhm.
Mentally rather
Okay.
than physically, he abused her mentally. Likewise, she's the only daughter to her parents. He need lot of dowry. He need a big building in the metropolitan city.
Right.
He never asked directly. Indirectly, he asked her. Like
Okay.
my brother have a big building. His mother-in-laws gave to him. I don't have anything for me.
Okay. So in these situations, what we do is we write down the facts exactly how they have happened, how he was cunning enough or clever enough to ask for dowry indirectly like this. And the way to prove it is to say that, okay, this money was transferred or this money was given. And then you have to prove, even if you've given it in cash or anything, if that person did something with that money, you can say that this person has made this out of this money. Ask that person under oath how that person got that made, you know. And there are, in these cases, there are testimonies that can be taken from the neighbors or the friends, or if she was working somewhere, then from her colleagues, from her parents, from herself, that okay, she had shared this with this person and this person has given a sworn affidavit to this effect, you know. Then we try to use that. But I would suggest everybody, whoever is here, if you know of anybody who's going through something, or you know, are still living in that situation, please tell them to have whatever they have gone through in writing. Write an email or a WhatsApp to the opposite party, to the abuser, saying, this is how you have been harassing me, hurting me, or damaging my reputation, or damaging my self-esteem, or whatever has happened. A lot of the times that person will be instigated, or will be you know, interested in sending a reply which will which will be deemed as acknowledging that, okay, yeah, this has happened. Okay, so it's very important for you to protect yourself and to create evidence for what is happening. And just like Monica just said, that you know, a lot of these things happen behind the four walls of a home, of a protected home, and you can't really do anything about it. But in that situation, you have to understand that you have to be smart enough to make sure that you have evidence to prove that this has happened to you. And for that, just by writing it down can go a long way. Okay. So anybody else? Thank you so much, Seema. Thank you so much. Sadia says we all have equal rights, equal liberty, so we should all treat women and men like human beings. Yes, we should. This is such a simple thing, but it goes above so many people's heads. Kumar Raj Dubey said, thank you for this special session. Thank you so much for sticking till the end. I know it was longer than expected. Thank you, Shrey. Thank you, Sanya ma'am, for the wonderful session. You're always involved. Thank you so much, Shrey. Thank you so much. That means so much to me. Anything else that you would like to ask or share before we close the session? Thank you so much, Sapna. I'm glad that you found it productive. Thank you so much. You can just unmute yourself. Thank you, Ravinderji. I'll try my best.
Thank you so much, Sanya, for this wonderful session. It gave me lots of insights.
Thank you so
And
much, Seema.
my case is pending in the court.
Yeah.
In fact, he had filed a divorce against me. And I was kept in dark from the last 2 years.
Mm.
He attended counseling sessions, and I was at home taking care of his family, cooking for his family, and he attended counseling sessions, keeping me in dark.
Wow. Wow. This is what they actually do. I've seen this happen a lot of the times when their ego is hurt, when their ego is bruised, and a lot of the times when they know they're in the wrong, they will point the finger at you because it's easier that way.
And his lawyer gave me a wrong case number on purpose.
Mm.
So
Wow.
he has, in fact, we are separated since 2 years. And I tried my best to save the relationship by calling for a family meeting.
Wow.
And the only thing I requested was an end of domestic violence. Even after that, in the month of October, he hit me again in front of my daughter. Domestic violence, it always happens in front of my daughter. So she's a proof to the domestic violence. And in December, his father tried to hit me.
Wow.
And his mom's just held the hand. So that was the limit for me. that was the time I took a stand and I told, I need a divorce now, not you, I need a divorce.
Seema, hats off to you. Hats off to you. And thank you so much for sharing this with all of us. I'm sure it's going to go a long way in helping women feel.
All I need from you and everyone around is blessings, so that me and my daughter can save and sail through this difficult time.
You have our blessings, our love, our strength, our support, Seema. Always. You can just get in touch with me after the session also. And if you want to talk, if you want to discuss anything, ask anything, I'm always here for you. And I am sure everybody in this room feels the same way. Right, guys? They've written such wonderful things about you in the chat box. We are so lucky to have.
I made a mistake by tolerating domestic violence. I don't want any other girl to undergo the pain, the torture, the trauma that I have been through.
That is a powerful message to say.
Just for the sake of family reputation, Khandan ki izzat.
It's not
This is not
worth it. It's not worth it.
My daughter, she's 11.5 years old. She understands everything. But
the good thing is that you're taking steps to get out of the situation. The good thing is that he's going to be paying for what he's done, and you're going to pick yourself back up and you're going to march on like the strong person that you are.
12 years, my mom saved him. And 2 years back also, when I wanted a divorce, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. तो पापा ने 2 साल बचाए हैं ये बोल के कि कैंसर ट्रीटमेंट हो जाने तो फिर अपन एक्शन लेंगे.
Okay. Seema, please don't cry. We're all here with you, Seema. You have to be strong. And I'm telling you, you are going to be the torchbearer for so many women. And you are such an inspiration to your daughter also, that you did not just say that it's okay. And you took steps to get out of it.
Hello.
Hi, Shay.
Hi, ma'am. It was really a wonderful session, and we have come across so many things, new things. And Seema ma'am's experience also, what she has gone through in her married life. And ma'am, I simply think in many ways that the law in our country needs a lot of amendment. And like ma'am, IPC, you can see ma'am, it is 1860 and it's 2021. So ma'am, there is so less fine and penalties, and there is no provision for men. And I think this is the reason why people are violating it. And if there is some strict law, then I think ma'am, surely the person will fear before doing such wrong with the women. And
Yes.
same as the women also, because I came across a case in which a lady filed a false divorce complaint and a false domestic violence complaint, in which she was having the problem actually with the mother-in-law, and this was the reason why she did so. So this is also a reason people take misuse or disadvantage of the act and try. And as I said earlier also, that with men this is not allowed. You can't take any remedy, or there's no safe side for you. So what is required is the amendment or a new act or some new provisions, so that men also can fight such cases. So ma'am, seriously, you are really an inspiration, and I would like to thank you that you are conducting such sessions, and in future also you should carry on with this work. Thank you, ma'am.
I'll do that. Thank you so much for sharing your views, Shay. And Sadhya, I will be uploading the video of this session on the YouTube channel. You can follow the YouTube channel. It's called Law Chakra by Sanya only. So I'll just write it down in the chat box also. So you can just subscribe to it, and I'll be uploading the recordings of all the sessions there. And you can just revisit whenever you're trying to read more about the laws on domestic violence. And thank you so much, Monica. Thank you so much, Shay. It was just amazing how interactive you were and how open you were with your opinions. And you're absolutely right. We do need amendments, but I also think we need implementation. We don't just need to say that, okay, yeah, this can be done, that can be done. A lot of the times we need the system to be there when we need it to be there. And that will come through having these conversations and to becoming those people that actually take a stand when it comes to us. So thank you, Shrey, and thank you, Seema. Everybody loves you and everybody is here to support you, and you can just please stay in touch with me and we can have a conversation whenever you deem fit. Manish, you're raising your hand. Do you want to say something? And if I have your permission, everybody, to close the session, can you just write yes in the chat box? I will also be sharing a feedback form with you in the group. If you're not a part of the WhatsApp group, please let me know by messaging me on Instagram. Sadhya, I think you wanted to unmute yourself and say something. You can do that. Please feel free. Who is that? Yeah, hi, sir. Hi,
Yes,
Sadhya.
ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Sadhya. How are you?
I'm fine. And you? Thank you.
Great. Please tell me.
I just want to tell Seema, ma'am, that make yourself brave and bold and teach your daughter about gender equality and gender justice and like bringing your child like a human being, not like a girl, you know. Don't
Absolutely.
just make her a good human being, not a girl, you know. I just wanna say it and thank you so much. Yeah, this is my second session here webinar, and thank you so much. I'm listening you again and again. I have a recording last session, so you are very great and explaining in a very well way. So thank you so much for this webinar, Sania ma'am.
Yes, so sweet. So sweet of you, Satya. Thank you so much. And you're
Thank you,
absolutely
ma'am.
right. Absolutely right. That raise your daughters as human beings, not as girls.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Satya, for sharing that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Sanya, and all the members for listening to my story so patiently. And all I request is blessings for me and my daughter. That is all I want.
You have all the blessings in the world, Seema. We're all with you. Just stay strong, okay?
Thanks a million.
Manish, you want to say something?
यस मैम,
Yes.
मुझे भी कुछ मैम मेरा ये क्वेश्चन था कि ये चीज भी अभी मेरी रिसेंटली मेरी सिस्टर के साथ चल रहा है ये चीज। अभी उनके साथ यही हुआ था कि रशियन ब्लड में उनके हस्बैंड ने उन पे हाथ उठा दिया था और उनका हाथ भी फ्रैक्चर कर दिया था और अब्यूजिंग लैंग्वेज भी यूज किया था। और फैमिली में थोड़ा फंक्शन था तो हमने सोचा कि ज्यादा कुछ हमें करना नहीं चाहिए, अभी मेडिकल हम नहीं कराए। देन इसके बाद उन्होंने प्रेशर डालने की भी कोशिश की, उन्होंने बल्कि माफी मांगने की बजाय हम पे घर पे 10-12 बंदा लेके आके हम पे प्रेशर डालने की कोशिश की। तो उसी टाइम पे अगले नेक्स्ट डे पे हमने कंप्लेंट करवाई, कंप्लेंट रजिस्टर्ड हो गया और हमें रिसीविंग भी मिल गया मेरे पेरेंट्स को। देन इसके बाद ये पता चला कि वो मेरी सिस्टर का फोन भी ट्रेस कर रहा था, तो उसे भी पता चल गया कि हमने कंप्लेंट करा दी है। तो देन इसके बाद उसने उनको घर में घुसने नहीं दिया, निकाल दिया घर से। तो अब वो घर पे ही हैं 2 दिन से। तो अब मुझे क्या करना चाहिए मैम?
मनीष, ये आपका जो आपने कंप्लेंट लिखवाया वो आपने 498A में चला गया था वो कंप्लेंट पुलिस में जो आपने लिखवाया, आपको आइडिया है उन्होंने क्या सेक्शन यूज किया?
उन्होंने रिसीविंग दिया था मैम, मैं एक बार चेक कर लूंगा, अभी मैंने
हाँ।
देखा नहीं।
तो उस कंप्लेंट के बिहाफ पे भी ना आई वुड सजेस्ट आप डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस का एक एप्लीकेशन अपने जहाँ पे भी आप रह रहे हैं वहाँ के मैजिस्ट्रेट के कोर्ट में आप जाके फाइल कर दीजिए एक एप्लीकेशन, या आप पुलिस में जाके विमेन सेल में उनको बोलिए कि आप ये मैजिस्ट्रेट के सामने एप्लीकेशन फाइल करना चाहते हैं डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस के अंडर, जहाँ पे आपको उस पे स्पेसिफिकली ये सारे इवेंट्स तो आपको बताने ही है जो जो हुआ है, साथ में ये भी कि घर से निकाल दिया गया है एंड वापस नहीं आने दे रहे। तो एक तो प्रोटेक्शन ऑर्डर के लिए आपको जो हमने अभी पढ़ा अभी सीखा प्रोटेक्शन ऑर्डर, उसके लिए स्ट्रेस करना है, और रेजिडेंस ऑर्डर के लिए कि उसको वहां पे रहने का हक है, उसको वहां से निकाल नहीं सकते, वहां पे वो सेफली रहेगी। और ये जो इंसान है जो उसका हस्बैंड है ये उसके साथ बदतमीजी कंटिन्यू नहीं कर सकता, उसको अप्रोच नहीं कर सकता, उसके साथ कम्युनिकेट नहीं कर सकता और उसकी फैमिली को थ्रेटन नहीं कर सकता। सबसे पहला स्टेप आई वुड से दिस इज द क्विकेस्ट रेमेडी दैट यू कैन गेट, ये सबसे फास्टेस्ट काम करेगा आपके लिए, तो आप प्लीज एप्लीकेशन डालिए.
Yes, ma'am.
ओके, एंड यू
Yes.
कैन ऑल्सो गेट इन टच विथ मी मनीष. आपको और कोई
Yes.
क्वेश्चंस या कुछ हो, आई अंडरस्टैंड देयर आर लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स जो आप सबके सामने नहीं डिस्कस कर सकते हैं, तो फील फ्री टू रीच आउट टू मी. आप मुझे मैसेज कर सकते हैं, मेरे लिंक्डइन चैनल पे भी मैसेज कर सकते हैं, मेरे इंस्टाग्राम पे भी कर सकते हैं, हर जगह नाम लॉ चक्रा बाय सानिया है, तो फील फ्री टू रीच आउट टू मी. ओके, आप
Okay,
ईमेल
ma'am.
भी कर
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So Lakshmi has written, thank you so much, ma'am, to host this wonderful session. The attendees have also made it so insightful. The presentation was just perfect to brief us about almost everything regarding the DV Act in such a short period of time. Thanks to you, Ms. Seema. Really hope you keep up with the strength. Thank you for speaking up, for being an inspiration to a lot of young women, to your own daughter. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. That was such a beautiful message. And yes, Seema, we're all with you, like I said, and everybody is here to support you and everybody is looking up to you. So stay strong, not just for yourself, for your daughter, and for all the women that you want to not go through all of this ever again. So all the very best to you, all the very best to everybody. Thank you for such a patient hearing. Now I will end this session. I'll upload the video on the YouTube channel. Somebody had asked, if there was the video available for the previous webinar also on the YouTube channel. The previous webinar I conducted with Your Legal Aid. So that is also available on the YouTube channel. It's Law Chakra by Sanya. I've shared the link in the chat box. You can go through it, subscribe to it, and also follow me on Instagram and stay in touch with me. It's been wonderful hearing such insightful stories. Seema, you are an inspiration, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your opinions with me, everybody. It's been an amazing session, and I wish you a great, great Sunday ahead. Thank you for being here. Have a good day. Bye, everyone.